Commander Thexelar stood before the holographic display in the war room of his flagship. His scales gleamed under the blue light as he studied the rotating image of a small blue planet. Earth, the humans called it, a perfect target. Show me the defense readings again, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 worlds. His tactical officer, a younger Kralith named Vorn, manipulated the controls. Data streamed across multiple screens. Thexelar read each line with growing satisfaction. No energy shields detected, Vorn reported. No plasma cannon networks. No orbital defense platforms. Their fastest vessels cannot even break the light barrier. Commander, by all measurements, this planet is completely defenseless. Thexelar's inner eyelids flickered with pleasure. The Kralith Dominion had been searching for an easy conquest, something to boost morale after their recent stalemate with the Bortak Federation. Earth seemed like a gift from the void itself. What about their military? Thexelar asked. Primitive, Vorn answered quickly. They use chemical propulsion for their rockets. Their weapons fire solid metal projectiles using explosive powders. We detected some basic energy weapons, but nothing that could penetrate our shields. Their largest military vehicles are metal boxes that roll on treads. The other officers in the war room chittered with amusement. Metal boxes on treads? What kind of species still use such ancient technology? Their population? Thexelar continued. Approximately 8 billion, concentrated in urban centers. We estimate that a show of force against 3 major cities would ensure immediate surrender. They have no unity government, Commander. Multiple nations constantly bickering with each other. They won't mount organized resistance. Thexelar felt the thrill of an easy victory. His superiors in the Dominion would be pleased. Perhaps this conquest would finally earn him the promotion he deserved. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We jumped to their system in one cycle. 12 warships should be more than sufficient. As the officers dispersed to carry out his orders, Thexelar returned his attention to the image of Earth. Such a beautiful planet, really. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. It would make an excellent colony world once the humans were removed or enslaved. He noticed something odd in the data scroll. Vorn, what is this notation here? This symbol next to Earth's designation? Vorn looked uncomfortable. It's nothing, Commander. Just an old marker in the galactic database. Some ancient warning placed by elder species. You know how they are. Always cryptic and mysterious. What does it say? It's not even a proper warning, sir. Just a notation that says approach with caution and Death World classification. But we've conquered Death World species before. Their environment makes them tough, but it doesn't make them technologically advanced. The humans barely have a presence in their own solar system. Thexelar dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. Elder species loved to make everything seem more complicated than it was. They'd been in space for so long that they'd forgotten what real warfare looked like. The cycle passed quickly. Thexelar's fleet gathered at the jump point. 12 magnificent warships bristling with weapons. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a continent. Each ship was protected by energy shields that could withstand sustained bombardment. Each ship represented the height of Kralith military engineering. All ships report ready, Commander, Vorn announced. Begin the jump, Thexelar ordered. Space folded. Reality bent. The fleet disappeared from one region of space and emerged in another. The Sol system materialized around them. Thexelar saw the yellow star that humans called the Sun. He saw the outer planets, gas giants that dwarfed his own homeworld, and there, the third planet from the star was Earth. Begin scanning for their military assets, Thexelar commanded. Prepare a standard surrender demand. All ships battle formation. The fleet moved through space with practiced precision. They would approach Earth slowly, giving the humans time to see them coming, time to feel fear, time to understand the futility of resistance, but something felt wrong. Commander, Vorn said, his voice uncertain, I'm detecting unusual activity in the galactic communication networks. Explain. Multiple species are suddenly monitoring this system. The Vex Collective has opened an observation channel. The Meridian Alliance has 3 scout ships at the edge of the system. Even the Ancients are watching, Commander. I'm detecting their signature data streams. Thexelar frowned. Why would so many species suddenly take interest in a backwater planet? Unless, are they hoping to claim Earth for themselves? Do they want to negotiate for the planet after we conquer it? Vorn studied his screens. I don't think so, sir. Some of the communication patterns suggest they're waiting for something. There are even betting pools opening on the galactic net. Betting on what? On how long our fleet survives, Commander. A chill ran through Thexlar's body. Survived against a defenseless planet? That made no sense. Perhaps they underestimate us, he said, trying to sound confident. Open all channels. Send the surrender demand on all frequencies the humans use. The communication officer worked her console. Demand sent, Commander. Waiting for response. Minutes passed. Silence. Send it again, Thexlar ordered. Maybe they need time to translate. The demand was sent again. More silence. Finally, a response came through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a human. The creature stood upright on two legs, had pale skin, and wore some kind of uniform decorated with colored ribbons and metal symbols. The human's face was calm, almost expressionless. This is General Martinez of the United Earth Defense Command, the human said in perfectly translated Kralith. You have entered our solar system without permission and with clear hostile intent. You have 30 minutes to turn your vessels around and leave our system. This is your only warning. The communication cut off. For a moment the war room was completely silent. Then someone laughed. Then another. Soon the entire room was filled with the chattering amusement of Kralith officers. Did that creature just threaten us? One officer asked between laughs. 30 minutes. Another howled. Or what? They'll throw rocks at us? Even Vorn was struggling not to laugh. Commander, should I respond? Thexlar felt his confidence returning. This was just human bravado, the last desperate posturing of a species that knew it was beaten. No response, he said. Let them wait. Let them fear. We'll see how brave they are when we start targeting their cities. But as the fleet continued its approach, Vorn's expression changed. He was staring at his tactical screen and all color had drained from his face. Commander, he said quietly, I think you need to see this. Thexlar moved to Vorn's station. What is it? I'm detecting launches, sir. Hundreds of launches. All across the planet. Vehicles emerging from the oceans. Vehicles emerging from underground silos. Aircraft taking off from military bases. Show me, the tactical display updated. Thexlar stared at it in disbelief. The planet below was lighting up like a star going nova. Every continent showed activity. Every ocean showed movement. What are all those signals? Thexlar demanded. Vorn's voice was barely a whisper. Weapons, Commander. They're all weapons. The 30-minute countdown had begun. Thexlar watched the tactical display update in real time. Each red dot represented something launching from Earth's surface or moving within its atmosphere. There were hundreds of them. No, thousands, report, he snapped, trying to keep the uncertainty from his voice. Vorn worked his console frantically. Commander, I'm reading massive deployment of military assets across the entire planet. Submarines are surfacing in all major oceans. Underground facilities are opening. Mobile platforms are moving to launch positions. Submarines? Thexlar repeated. Why would they put military vessels underwater? Unknown, sir. But each submarine appears to carry multiple weapons. Large weapons. I'm also detecting hundreds of what the humans call silos opening across several continents. These appear to be underground launch facilities. Another officer called out from the sensor station. Commander, their aircraft are scrambling. I count over 300 large bomber craft taking off from bases worldwide. They're carrying weapons under their wings. Thexlar felt confusion mixing with his earlier confidence. This level of military deployment seemed excessive for a species that was supposedly primitive. But what could they possibly launch that would threaten his fleet? His shields could stop any conventional explosive. What kind of weapons are we looking at? He asked. Vorn was silent for a moment, running scans. When he spoke, his voice carried a strange tone. They appear to be fusion and fission devices, Commander. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear? Thexlar relaxed slightly. Nuclear weapons were ancient technology. Most civilized species had abandoned them thousands of years ago, when energy shields were invented. Nuclear explosions were inefficient, dirty, and easy to defend against. How many could they possibly have? A dozen? 20? Vorn didn't answer immediately. He ran the scan again as if not believing his own results. Vorn, I asked you a question. Commander, according to my scans, the humans have approximately 13,000 nuclear weapons. Active, maintained, ready to launch. The war room went silent. That can't be right, Thexlar said. Run the scan again. Your equipment must be malfunctioning. I've run it 4 times, sir. The number is accurate. 13,000 nuclear weapons, some in underground silos, Some on submarines, some on mobile launchers that move on vehicles, some carried by aircraft, some stored in hardened facilities, all of them operational. One of the younger officers spoke up, her voice shaking. "Commander, why would any species build so many weapons of mass destruction? A dozen nuclear weapons would be enough to defend against most threats. 100 would be overkill. But 13,000? Thexler had no answer. He stared at the display, watching the red dots multiply as more detection data came in. The humans weren't just mobilizing their military. They were preparing for total war. Analysis, he demanded. What kind of damage could these weapons do to our fleet? The weapons specialist, an older Kralith named Dax, ran calculations. "Commander, our shields can absorb nuclear explosions. A single weapon wouldn't harm us. Even 10 weapons simultaneously might only drain our shields by 20%. Then we have nothing to worry about," Thexler said, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. "However," Dax continued, "if they coordinate their weapons properly, if they layer their attacks to overwhelm our shield regeneration, if they use enough weapons in rapid succession, Commander, each of their larger weapons carries explosive yields between 500 kilotons and 50 megatons. If they concentrate fire on one ship, even our shields would eventually fail through sheer kinetic force and thermal energy. How many weapons would that take? For one ship? Perhaps 50 weapons fired in waves. For the entire fleet? They have enough weapons to target every ship multiple times over." Thexler felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear, not panic, not yet, but a cold understanding that this conquest might not be as simple as he'd thought. "Open a channel to the Galactic Net," he ordered. "I want to know why our intelligence never reported this arsenal." The communication officer established the link. Within moments, responses started coming in. Most were from civilian channels, traders, and observers. But one caught Thexler's attention. It was from an ambassador of the Vex Collective, an old species that had been exploring space for over 10,000 years. The ambassador's hologram appeared above the communication console. She was a Vex, a species that looked like floating jellyfish with bioluminescent patterns. Her patterns flickered with what Thexler recognized as amusement. "Commander Thexler of the Kralith Dominion," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "I see you've discovered Earth's little secret. Why wasn't this information in the galactic database?" Thexler demanded. "Why weren't we warned that this species has an arsenal capable of destroying themselves dozens of times over?" "Because no civilized species would believe it," the ambassador replied. "When we first discovered Earth and scanned their weapon systems, we thought our sensors were broken. We ran the scans 17 times before accepting the results. But why? Why would they build so many weapons?" The Vex ambassador's patterns shifted to colors that Thexler couldn't quite interpret. "Because they pointed them at themselves, Commander. For decades, the humans spent nearly 50 years of their history with these weapons aimed at their own cities. They called it mutually assured destruction. Each side had enough weapons to destroy the other side completely, which meant neither side could attack without guaranteeing their own annihilation." Thexler couldn't comprehend what he was hearing. "That's madness. Any species that unstable should have destroyed itself." "One would think so," the ambassador agreed. "But they didn't. They lived under the constant threat of self-inflicted extinction. They taught their children to hide under desks in case of nuclear war. They built bunkers. They practiced evacuation drills. They made plans for the apocalypse and then went about their daily lives." Another voice joined the conversation. It was a trader from the Broken Suns Collective. "They're Deathworlders, Kralith. Their planet tried to kill them for millions of years. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. They evolved to thrive under constant threat. When they couldn't find external enemies dangerous enough, they became their own enemy, and they got very, very good at it." Thexler looked back at the tactical display. The red dots had stopped multiplying, but there were still thousands of them. Thousands of weapons all tracking his fleet. "But they stopped pointing them at each other," he said. "That means they came to their senses, right? They became civilized." The Vex ambassador made a sound that might have been a laugh. "They stopped actively targeting each other, yes. But they never dismantled the weapons, Commander. They signed treaties. They reduced their numbers from over 60,000 weapons to a mere 13,000. They called this progress. Do you understand what that means?" "What?" "It means they have restraint. It means they can hold a gun to their own head for decades and choose not to pull the trigger. But it doesn't mean they don't know how to pull that trigger. And Commander, you just gave them a new target. The communication cut off. Thexler stood frozen, staring at Earth on the main display. The beautiful blue planet suddenly seemed much more dangerous. His tactical officer's voice broke through his thoughts. Commander, we're receiving another transmission from Earth. It's the same human as before. Put it through. General Martinez appeared on the screen again. His expression was still calm, but there was something in his eyes. A hardness. A certainty. Commander Thexler, the general said, you now have 15 minutes remaining. I strongly suggest you use them wisely. Thexler stared at the transmission screen long after General Martinez's face had disappeared. 15 minutes. The human had said it with such calm certainty as if the outcome was already decided. Commander, Bourne said carefully, what are your orders? That was the question, wasn't it? Thexler had come here expecting an easy conquest. He had come with 12 warships and supreme confidence. Now he stood in his war room watching thousands of weapons track his fleet. And he didn't know what to do. Pride warred with survival instinct. The Kralith Dominion did not retreat. They did not show weakness. Every officer in this room, every soldier on every ship expected victory. If he turned back now, he would be labeled a coward. His career would be over. But if he stayed in those weapons launched... Get me more information, Thexler ordered. Contact every species that has dealt with Earth. I want to know everything about these humans. How they think. How they fight. Why they built such an arsenal. The communication officer worked quickly. Within minutes, responses started flooding in. It seemed that half the galaxy had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see what the Kralith would do. A grizzled trader from the Wanderers Guild was first to respond. His species looked like upright wolves, and his fur was gray with age. You want to know about humans? I've traded with them for 5 years. Let me tell you what you're dealing with. The trader's image filled the screen. Humans come from a planet where almost everything wants to kill them. Predators with claws and teeth. Diseases that can wipe out millions. Weather that can flatten cities, earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes. Their planet is what we call a Class 12 death world. Do you understand what that means? I've read the classifications, Thexler said impatiently. Reading and understanding are different things, the trader snapped. Most species evolve on gentle worlds. Plenty of food. Mild weather. Few predators. When those species face danger, they run or hide. But Death World species can't run. There's nowhere safe to run to, so they evolve differently. They evolved to fight back, another voice joined in. It was a military historian from the Celestial Archives. Commander, have you reviewed Earth's history? Their military conflicts? I read the summary, Thexler said. Multiple small wars. Nothing impressive? Then you didn't read carefully enough. Let me share some data with you. Information flooded Thexler's displays. Battles, wars, conflicts stretching back thousands of years. He saw images of ancient humans fighting with stone weapons, then metal swords, then guns, then tanks, then aircraft. Each generation found new and better ways to kill. Look at their major conflicts, the historian continued. Their First World War killed 17 million people. They called it the war to end all wars. 20 years later, they started another one. Their Second World War killed 75 million people. 75 million, Commander. That's more than the entire population of some civilized worlds. Thexler felt his scales itching, a sign of stress. But they're past that now. They're civilized, are they? The historian asked. Let me show you something interesting. After their Second World War, they invented nuclear weapons. Within years, 2 major human nations had enough weapons to destroy all life on their planet. Did they stop? Did they step back from the edge? No, they built more weapons. Bigger weapons. They put them on submarines so they could hide them. They put them on mobile launchers so they could move them. They put them in silos so they could protect them. The Vex ambassador's hologram reappeared. And then, Commander, they played the most dangerous game in galactic history. They called it the Cold War. For decades, 2 human nations stood on the brink of mutual annihilation. Every day they could have ended their world. Every day they chose not to. Do you understand the kind of psychological strength that requires? Or madness? Thexler muttered. Perhaps both, the ambassador agreed. But consider this. They had weapons that could end their civilization. They were afraid. Any rational species would have dismantled those weapons. But the humans thought differently. They said, if we both have the power to destroy each other, then neither of us can attack. They turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Vorn had been researching Earth's military history on his console. Now he looked up, his face pale. "Commander, I found something." During their Cold War period, there were at least 6 incidents where their weapons nearly launched by accident. Computer errors, false alarms, misunderstandings. Each time they were minutes away from starting a nuclear war. Each time individual humans made the choice not to launch. "So they made mistakes," Thexlar said. "That proves they're not as controlled as they claim." "No, sir," Vorn replied quietly. "It proves they built systems with multiple failsafes. It proves that even when their computers said to launch, even when their procedures said to launch, they still stopped and questioned. They still chose not to fire. That's not weakness, Commander. That's discipline." A new voice entered the conversation. It was a military commander from the Talgorian Empire, a species that had fought wars across 3 star systems. "Kralith, Commander, I have fought many battles. I have faced enemies with better weapons than mine. I have faced enemies with superior numbers. But I have never faced an enemy that scares me more than the humans." "Why?" Thexlar asked. "They have no shields, no energy weapons, no FTL combat ships." "Because they don't need them," the Talgorian commander explained. "Look at their military doctrine. When they fight, they don't fight for territory or resources. They fight for complete victory. They have a phrase, unconditional surrender. Do you know what that means? It means they don't stop until their enemy is utterly defeated. They don't negotiate. They don't compromise. They pursue total victory," the commander continued. "And they're willing to sacrifice anything to win. During their Second World War, one of their cities was attacked. Did they surrender? No. They converted their entire industrial economy to war production in months. Civilians worked in factories. Women built weapons. Children collected scrap metal. In 4 years, they produced 300,000 aircraft, 100,000 tanks, and thousands of ships. An entire nation became a war machine." Thexlar looked at the tactical display again. The red dots representing human weapons seemed to pulse like heartbeats. Thousands of heartbeats, all synchronized, all waiting. "But that was in their past," he said, trying to convince himself. "They're peaceful now. They've moved beyond such violence." The Vex ambassador's patterns flickered sadly. "Commander, they have not moved beyond violence. They have simply learned to control it. Think about what you're seeing. They maintain 13,000 nuclear weapons. They maintain submarines capable of destroying continents. They maintain bomber aircraft that can carry apocalyptic payloads. All of this in a time of relative peace. Why? Because they can't trust each other," Thexlar said. "No," the ambassador corrected. "Because they understand that the universe is dangerous. Because they remember their history. Because they know that peace is not the absence of weapons, but the choice not to use them. Every day they make that choice. But Commander, you are not giving them a choice anymore. You are forcing them to do what they trained for generations to do." Thexlar's communication officer interrupted. "Commander, we're receiving a message from Earth. They're sending historical documents. It appears to be their military training materials." "Display it." Text and images appeared on the screen. Thexlar saw human soldiers training. He saw military academies where young humans learned strategy. He saw exercises where they practiced response to attacks. Everything was documented. Everything was planned. They had trained for every possible scenario. One phrase kept appearing in the documents. "Peace through strength." "What does that mean?" Thexlar asked aloud. The Talgorian commander answered. "It means they believe the best way to prevent war is to be so prepared for war that no one dares start one. And Commander, they have been preparing for this war for decades, maybe centuries. Every weapon system, every military unit, every defensive protocol, all of it designed and maintained and practiced just in case someone like you showed up." Thexlar checked the timer. 7 minutes remaining. 7 minutes left on the human countdown. Thexlar paced his war room, his mind racing. Every piece of information he'd received pointed to the same conclusion. Retreat. Leave this system. Find an easier target. But his pride wouldn't let him. He had come here with 12 warships. He had announced his intentions on the Galactic net. Every species was watching. If he retreated now, the Kralith Dominion would become a joke. Worse, other species might see them as weak, easy prey. There had to be a middle path, a way to demonstrate his power without committing to full invasion. "Vorn," he said, making his decision, "prepare to target one of their coastal cities. We'll destroy it from orbit. A demonstration of our power. Then we'll negotiate. Vorn looked uncertain. Commander, are you sure? If we attack, they will respond. With what? Nuclear weapons? Our shields can handle nuclear explosions. We'll show them the futility of their primitive arsenal, and then they'll surrender. It was logical. It made sense. One city destroyed, millions dead, and the rest of humanity would see the truth. Their weapons couldn't hurt his fleet. Resistance was pointless. Target the city they call New York, Thexelar ordered. Major population center. Coastal location. Destroying it will prove our resolve. The weapons officer began programming the strike. Plasma lances charging, Commander. We can level the entire city in one sustained burst. 5 minutes to their deadline, Vorn announced nervously. They can keep their deadline, Thexelar said. This ends now. Fire when ready. The weapons officer pressed the activation sequence. From the underside of the flagship, brilliant blue energy gathered. The plasma lances, capable of melting through starship hulls, focused their power on a single point on Earth's surface. The energy beam lanced down through the atmosphere, burning a hole through clouds, ionizing air molecules, creating a column of pure destruction. It struck the target area. Buildings vaporized, stone melted, metal flowed like water. The beam carved a glowing crater into the coastal city. Direct hit, Commander, the weapons officer reported. Estimated casualties in the millions. Thexelar felt a grim satisfaction. Now the humans would understand. Now they would. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Multiple launch detections, Vorn shouted. Hundreds of missiles launching from Earth's surface. Thousands. The tactical display exploded with red indicators. From underground silos across multiple continents, missiles erupted. From submarines in every ocean, weapons surged toward the surface. From mobile launchers, from aircraft, from positions Thexelar's sensors hadn't even detected. All of them were aimed at his fleet. No, not his fleet. His flagship specifically. Impossible, Thexelar breathed. How can they target us so precisely? They have no targeting systems that sophisticated. They're using multiple tracking methods, the sensor officer reported. Radio, radar, optical, infrared. They're coordinating through a network of satellites. Commander, they've been tracking us since we entered their system. They know exactly where every ship is positioned. The first wave of missiles reached them. Conventional weapons with high explosive warheads. They detonated against the shields in brilliant flashes. The shields held easily, just as Thexelar knew they would, see? He said, trying to sound confident. Their weapons cannot harm us, but the missiles kept coming. Wave after wave. Not just conventional explosives now. Nuclear warheads began detonating against the shields. The tactical display showed yield estimates. 500 kilotons, 1 megaton, 5 megatons. The shields flickered but held. Shield strength at 90%, the engineering officer reported. No significant damage. Thexelar allowed himself to relax slightly. This was just like he predicted. The humans were throwing everything at him, but it wasn't enough. His shields could— Second wave incoming, Vorn said. These are different. Much faster. ICBMs with MARV warheads. Thexelar didn't know what those acronyms meant, but he understood when the missiles arrived. Each missile split apart high in the atmosphere, releasing multiple warheads. 1 missile became 10. 10 missiles became 100. The warheads fell like rain. Nuclear explosions hammered the shields in rapid succession. 50 kiloton blast, 1 megaton blast, 5 megaton blast. Detonation after detonation, each one calculated to hit before the shields could fully regenerate. Shield strength at 70%, the engineering officer called out. 65%. 60%. Divert power from weapons to shields, Thexelar ordered. All available power. Third wave incoming, Vorn said, his voice cracking. Submarine-launched missiles. Closer range. Faster impact. These missiles came up from the oceans, launched from submarines positioned all around the planet. They flew lower, faster, using the curve of the Earth to mask their approach until the last moment. More nuclear explosions. The shield was now a constant sphere of detonating light around the flagship. The ship shook with each impact. Shield strength at 40%, 35%. Commander, we're taking damage on the other ships, Vorn reported. The humans are targeting all vessels. The destroyer Calvex reports shields at 20%. The cruiser Dormak has lost aft shielding. Thexelar grabbed his command chair to steady himself as another series of explosions rocked the ship. This wasn't possible. These were primitive weapons. chemical rockets and nuclear bombs. Stone Age technology compared to galactic standard, but there were so many of them, and the humans were using them with terrifying precision. Fourth wave, Vorn said, and his voice carried pure fear now. Commander, these are different. I'm detecting spacecraft. Human military spacecraft. What? They do, sir. They've been hiding them. Classified military assets. They're small, fast, heavily armed with kinetic weapons. New contacts appeared on the tactical display. Sleek craft that didn't look like the primitive chemical rockets Earth used for civilian space travel. These were purpose-built war machines. They swarmed the fleet like angry insects. Railguns fired solid metal projectiles at incredible velocities. No explosions. No radiation. Just kinetic energy. Pure momentum. Mass times velocity equals devastation. A tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole struck the flagship's shields at 8 kilometers per second. The shields flickered. Another rod hit. Then another. They're targeting our shield generators, the engineering officer shouted. They're not just trying to overwhelm the shields. They're trying to knock out our ability to regenerate them. Evasive maneuvers, Thexler ordered. The flagship tried to turn to present a different aspect to buy time for the shields to recover. But the human spacecraft adjusted instantly, maintaining their firing solutions. An alarm sounded. A different alarm. One Thexler had never heard in combat before. Shield failure imminent, the engineering officer reported. We've taken too much sustained damage. The generators are overheating. Impossible, Thexler said. These are primitive weapons. Chemical explosions and metal rods. How can they? A massive explosion rocked the ship. The shield flickered and died completely. Shields down, someone screamed. For exactly 3 seconds, the flagship hung in space without protection. In those 3 seconds, the humans proved they had been waiting for precisely this moment. A spread of kinetic kill vehicles struck the ship's hull. Not nuclear, not explosive, just solid metal moving very fast. They punched through armor plating designed to withstand energy weapons. They penetrated deep into the ship's structure. The flagship shuddered. Atmosphere vented from a dozen hull breaches. Alarms shrieked from every station. Damage report, Thexler shouted. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Casualty reports coming in. Engineering reports critical damage to the port plasma lance. We've lost maneuvering thrusters on the starboard side. Vorn looked up from his console, his face a mask of shock. Commander, the destroyer Calvex is gone. Shield failure followed by catastrophic hull breach. No survivors. The cruiser Dormak is disabled. The frigate Talmex is requesting permission to retreat. Retreat? Thexler couldn't process what he was hearing. His fleet was being destroyed by humans, by a species that barely had a presence in their own solar system. A new transmission forced its way through on priority channels. General Martinez appeared on the screen. Behind him, Thexler could see what looked like a military command center. Humans working at computers. Displays showing the space battle from multiple angles. The general's voice was cold. Commander Thexler, you killed 3 million of my people. You had a chance to leave. You chose war. Now you're learning what humanity does best. How? Thexler asked. Your technology is primitive. Your weapons are ancient. How are you doing this? General Martinez's expression didn't change. Because we've been preparing for this our entire history. Because we spent 70 years with guns pointed at our own heads and learned to use them precisely. Because we're very, very good at killing, Commander. We've had a lot of practice, another impact. The flagship lurched. You have a choice now, Martinez continued. Retreat immediately or die here. Those are your only options. Thexler stood in his damaged war room, surrounded by sparking consoles and flickering lights. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. The smell of burned circuits filled the air. Behind him, he could hear crew members shouting damage reports and casualty counts. Pride demanded he stay and fight. Honor demanded revenge for his destroyed ships and dead soldiers. Everything in his training, everything in Kralith culture screamed at him to push forward, to commit fully to battle. But survival instinct was stronger. All ships, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Then louder. All ships retreat. Full emergency withdrawal. Commander? Vorn looked at him with disbelief. I gave the order. Get us out of this system. Now. The remaining ships of his fleet turned away from Earth. Their faster-than-light drives began charging, preparing to jump. The human spacecraft continued their assault, hammering the fleeing vessels with kinetic weapons, but they didn't pursue beyond Earth's orbit. They didn't need to. They had made their point. The jump drives engaged. Space folded. The battered Kralith fleet disappeared from the Sol system, leaving behind debris from destroyed ships and the bodies of thousands of dead Kralith soldiers. 3 weeks later, Thexlar sat before a military tribunal on his homeworld. The chamber was filled with senior commanders, political leaders, and media observers. His failure was public. His shame was complete. "You retreated," the presiding admiral said, her voice cold. "You retreated from a pre-FTL species. Explain yourself." Thexlar had prepared for this moment. He had his defense ready. He would tell them about the nuclear weapons, about the unexpected spacecraft, about the coordinated assault that had destroyed 3 of his ships and damaged 5 others. But as he stood there looking at the faces of those who would judge him, he realized something. They already knew. Intelligence reports had been filed. Sensor data had been reviewed. The entire engagement had been recorded by multiple galactic observers. They weren't asking him to explain the tactical situation. They were asking him to explain his failure to predict it. "We underestimated them," Thexlar said simply. "The humans. We saw primitive technology and assumed primitive thinking. We were wrong." "Elaborate," the admiral commanded. "They have 13,000 nuclear weapons," Thexlar began. "Maintained, operational, ready to launch at any moment. They have submarines that can hide underwater and strike without warning. They have mobile launchers that can move to new positions. They have spacecraft we never detected until they attacked. They have a military doctrine built around something they call mutually assured destruction. For decades, they lived under the threat of self-annihilation. They adapted to it. They thrived in it." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "They are not primitive, honored counsel. They are practiced. Every weapon system has been tested. Every scenario has been planned for. Every soldier has been trained. They spent generations preparing for war while maintaining peace. And when we forced them to choose, they chose war without hesitation." The tribunal listened in silence. When Thexlar finished, the admiral leaned forward. "Do you believe they would have used their full arsenal? All 13,000 weapons?" Thexlar thought about General Martinez's cold eyes, about the precision of the human assault, about the willingness to sacrifice 3 million of their own people rather than surrender. "Yes," he said. "If we had not retreated, they would have used everything. They would have destroyed my fleet completely, even if it meant rendering their own planet temporarily uninhabitable. They practice something they call scorched earth warfare. If they cannot win, they ensure their enemy cannot win either." A murmur ran through the chamber. The concept was alien to most galactic species. War was about conquest, about gaining resources or territory. The idea of destroying everything rather than losing was seen as irrational. But Thexlar had seen it in the humans' eyes. They weren't irrational. They were committed. The tribunal took 3 days to deliberate. In the end, Thexlar was stripped of his command but not executed or imprisoned. The council had reviewed all the evidence. They had consulted with other species. They had reached a conclusion. Earth was to be designated as a protected world, not because the galactic community wanted to protect humanity, but because they wanted to protect themselves from humanity. Across the galaxy, the story spread, in trade stations and military academies, on diplomatic channels and civilian networks. Beings discussed what had happened. The species that had almost destroyed itself now protected itself with the same weapons. The Deathworlders who had survived their own violence now turned that violence outward. The debate raged for months. Some species argued that humanity should be welcomed into the galactic community immediately. Their military strength would make them valuable allies. Others argued that humanity should be quarantined, kept isolated until they evolved beyond their violent tendencies. In the end, neither approach was adopted. Instead, humanity received something they had never asked for and probably didn't want: respect. Trade delegations began arriving at Earth. Cautious at first, always careful to announce themselves and state peaceful intentions, human products began appearing in galactic markets. Human media began circulating through civilian channels. Human music, art, and literature found audiences among the stars. But more significantly, ambassadors arrived. Official diplomatic envoys from dozens of species, all seeking to establish formal relations with humanity. The message was clear: if we cannot conquer them, we should negotiate with them. Earth's governments, surprised by the sudden attention, established the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. General Martinez, who had commanded the defense against the Kralith, was promoted to head of planetary security. In his first official statement to the galactic community, he said something that would be quoted for generations. Humanity does not seek war. We never have, but we are very, very good at it. We spent thousands of years fighting each other, and we learned hard lessons. We built weapons capable of ending our world because we were afraid of each other. Then we learned to control that fear. We choose peace, but we are prepared for war. We will always be prepared for war. That's not a threat. That's a promise. At the Celestial Military Academy, located in neutral space between three major powers, a new course was added to the curriculum: Human Military Doctrine and the Terra Paradox. Students from across the galaxy studied Earth's history, trying to understand how a species could be simultaneously so peaceful and so dangerous. The instructor for the course was a veteran commander from the Talgorian Empire. On the first day of class, a young cadet from a peaceful species raised her appendage and asked a question. "Professor, I've reviewed the materials. The humans have not used their nuclear weapons in warfare since they first developed them. They haven't fought a major world war in over 80 years. They spend more resources on medicine and education than on military assets. They seem peaceful. So why does everyone fear them?" The professor brought up a holographic display of Earth. The beautiful blue planet rotated slowly, white clouds drifting across azure oceans. "Tell me, cadet, what do you see?" "A peaceful world," the cadet replied. "Look deeper. Use military sensors, full spectrum analysis." The cadet adjusted the display. Gradually, other information appeared. Underground silos, submarine positions, military bases, satellite networks, defense grids, and everywhere always the weapons. Thousands of weapons maintained and ready. "They are peaceful," the professor agreed. "They have been at relative peace for decades. But cadet, they never stopped preparing for war. They never dismantled their arsenals. They never let their guards down. Most species achieve peace by removing the means of war. Humans achieve peace by being so prepared for war that no one dares start one." The cadet studied the display, seeing the contrast between Earth's peaceful cities and its ready military. "It's like they're two different civilizations," she said. "No," the professor corrected. "That's the Terra Paradox. They are one civilization. They are simultaneously the most peaceful and most violent species in the galaxy. They build hospitals and schools and parks. They create art and music and literature. They laugh and love and dream. And underneath all of that, they maintain the capacity for total war. Always. Forever. Because that's what you do when your planet spent millions of years trying to kill you. You never ever let your guard down." He pulled up footage of the Kralith engagement. The cadet watched as human weapons launched by the thousands, as spacecraft emerged from hiding, as a fleet of warships was systematically destroyed. "Thexelar learned this lesson," the professor continued. "Others will learn it too. There will always be species that look at Earth and see an easy target. They will see the lack of shields and energy weapons. They will see the primitive technology. They will think the humans are weak. But they're not weak," the cadet said quietly. "No, they are practiced. There is a difference between a species that cannot fight and a species that chooses not to fight. The humans made their choice long ago. They choose peace, but they remember war. They study it. They prepare for it. They train every generation for it. And if you force them to fight, you will learn what they learned during their darkest times."